She didn't expect the knock at the door to feel like the start of something that would unsettle her in the simplest, most ordinary way. It was late evening, the kind of quiet hour when the house hummed softly and she was finally settling after a long day. Her nephew, Larith, had arrived earlier for a weekend stay, cheerful and talkative as always. She had welcomed the familiar warmth of family energy, but she hadn't expected him to bring someone with him, someone who wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. When she opened the door, Larif stood with his backpack, grinning, and beside him stood a young man she vaguely recognized from a few community gatherings. His name was Raiden, polite and calm, with a straightforward manner that made him seem older than he was. And when she greeted them, something odd happened. Not inappropriate, not tense, just a momentary stillness. Raiden met her eyes, perhaps simply unsure of where to look, perhaps startled by surprise, but it lasted a fraction longer than it should have, just enough for her to notice. Not romantic, not suggestive, just a misplaced, awkward pause that made her wonder why he seemed nervous. She stepped aside, offering them entry with an easy smile. "Larif, you didn't tell me you were bringing someone." Larif laughed in that earnest way of his. "Auntie, we weren't planning on it. His ride fell through and I didn't want to leave him stranded. Is it okay if he stays for just tonight?"
She nodded, because of course it was. She'd always been a safe place for the young ones in the family, including their friends. And Raiden, from everything she knew, was kind, studious, and respectful. Still, she couldn't quite shake the small flicker of concern, not about him, but about making sure the household stayed orderly, comfortable, and well-managed. The living room felt warmer with the extra presents. She noticed Raiden hovering awkwardly, unsure where to put his shoes or whether he should sit. It reminded her of how she used to feel when she visited new homes as a girl, cautious, trying not to disturb anything. "Make yourself comfortable," she told him gently. "There's no rush with anything." He gave a small nod, grateful, keeping a polite distance and speaking only when spoken to. The earlier awkwardness faded, replaced with simple, normal interaction. Still, she kept a quiet awareness, not out of suspicion, but responsibility. She was the adult host, after all. Dinner was simple: warm lentils, soft flatbread, and leftover vegetable stew. They ate together with easy conversation. Larif filled most of the silence, talking about his studies, about the rain that had caught them earlier, and about how he planned to spend the weekend relaxing. Raiden mostly listened, adding the occasional comment with a steady, respectful tone. Not once did he show any behavior that bothered her. If anything, he seemed overly cautious not to intrude. The slight moment from earlier settled into something explainable. Perhaps he had been uncertain how to greet her, or perhaps he was simply shy. She let the thought drift away. After dinner, she showed them to the guest room. 2 floor mattresses, clean blankets, and a small table lamp made the space cozy. Larif thanked her enthusiastically. Raiden thanked her quietly, almost formally. She stepped out, closing the door halfway so they could settle. But later that night, while preparing tea in the kitchen, she heard soft footsteps behind her. When she turned, Raiden stood near the entrance, careful not to cross fully into the room. "Auntie," he said, "sorry to bother you. Do you have an extra charger? Mine isn't working." She handed him one from a drawer. Nothing unusual, no tension, just a young guest asking for something simple. Yet as he thanked her and stepped back, she saw something in his expression, fatigue maybe, or worry, something entirely non-romantic, something human and young, like he was carrying a personal struggle he hadn't spoken of. It wasn't her place to pry, but she felt a small tug of compassion, the kind adults always feel for the younger generation when they seem lost. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Later, as she turned off the lights and headed to her room, she couldn't shake the sense that tomorrow would bring conversations she hadn't anticipated, conversations that might reveal what weighed on Raiden's mind. And as she closed her bedroom door, she wondered gently, what was he going through that made him look so tired? She woke earlier than usual the next morning, stirred by the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. The house always felt gentler on rainy days, almost as if it exhaled with her. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped quietly into the hallway, careful not to wake the boys. But when she reached the living room, she found someone awake already. Raiden sat at the edge of the sofa, elbows resting on his knees, holding a worn mug between his palms. His posture wasn't tense, just tired, as though he had slept lightly and woken too soon. He noticed her presence immediately and stood respectfully. "Auntie, good morning. I'm sorry. I didn't want to disturb anyone." "You're not disturbing anything," she assured him, walking toward the kitchen. "Just sit. I'll make breakfast." He nodded and sat again, but she sensed a heaviness around him. Not discomfort, just a quiet weight. Something was clearly on his mind, and though she had no intention of intruding, she couldn't help noticing it. She prepared simple morning tea and slices of warm toast. When she set the plate before him, he thanked her with that same polite tone he always used. She wondered if he spoke like that at home too, or if he reserved it for people he barely knew. "You didn't sleep well?" she asked gently. For a moment he hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "It happens sometimes." She didn't press further. Some young adults needed time before opening up. Others never did, and that was fine too. A few minutes later, Larif shuffled out of the guest room with sleepy eyes and messy hair. His cheerful energy returned instantly when he saw breakfast ready. He chatted about how the rain had kept him awake, how he hoped they could still go out later, how he wished weekends lasted longer. Raydan listened quietly, stirring his tea. She noticed the subtle contrast, Larif's carefree lightness and Raydan's quiet restraint. She wondered what shaped such differences between two young men who were nearly the same age. After breakfast, they helped clear the dishes, even though she insisted it wasn't necessary. Larif hummed while drying the plates. Raydan folded the dish towels neatly afterward. Small acts, but they spoke of upbringing and gratitude. The rain didn't let up. By late morning, gray clouds poured steady sheets over the street, making it clear the boys wouldn't be going anywhere soon. Larif retreated to the guest room to work on a school project. Raydan, however, lingered in the living room, flipping through one of the magazines on the side table. She was sorting laundry nearby when she noticed him pause. Something on a page made his expression shift, not emotionally, not dramatically, but in a way that caught her attention. She stepped closer. "Something interesting there?" she asked lightly. He shook his head. "Just an article about managing stress. I guess I didn't expect to find something helpful in an old magazine." His voice wavered just enough for her to realize that whatever he was dealing with ran deeper than a restless night. She didn't want to pry, but she also didn't want him to carry everything alone if he needed support. "You know," she said, folding a towel gently, "young people sometimes think they have to handle everything by themselves, but talking helps more than most expect." Rayden lowered the magazine. His eyes didn't hold discomfort, just contemplation. "I'm not used to talking about things," he admitted, "but thank you." It wasn't a confession, not even close. It was simply a young man acknowledging kindness. She smiled in return and continued with the laundry, letting the moment pass naturally. The day remained quiet. Rain softened the hours, giving the house a peaceful rhythm. She made lunch. They ate together without hurry. For a while, the atmosphere felt steady, grounded, almost serene. But in the late afternoon, she noticed Rayden pacing near the window, holding his phone with a troubled look. Not fear, just worry, the kind that came from expecting news that didn't arrive. When he finally stepped outside onto the covered porch to make a call, his voice stayed low, but the tone carried enough strain to make her pause her step. She wasn't trying to listen. She simply heard the edge of his words through the open doorway. "It's okay. I'll figure it out. Just let me know when you can." He hung up quietly, shoulders dropping just a little before he straightened again. That was when she realized something more serious was happening in this young man's life, something he wasn't saying yet. And as he stepped back inside, she wondered gently, what burden was he carrying alone? The rain eased by early evening, leaving the streets damp and shining under the dim porch light. The house felt softer again, wrapped in that familiar calm that settled after a long day. She moved through the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, letting the warm scent of simmering lentils fill the air. Larif had fallen asleep while studying, sprawled halfway across the guest room mattress. She left him as he was, knowing he would wake soon enough. But Radon was still quiet, seated in the corner of the living room with his phone untouched beside him. His posture wasn't tense, only thoughtful, as though he was waiting for strength he hadn't gathered yet. She set the plates on the table. "Dinner's ready," she called gently. Radon rose immediately, offering to help, but she waved him off. He sat across from her, still polite, still careful, still carrying that subdued weight. The earlier phone call lingered in her mind, not because she wanted to know the details, but because something about the tone had sounded like a young man trying hard to stay composed. They ate in calm silence for a moment before she spoke. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes life gives us seasons where everything feels heavier than it should." He looked up, not startled, just thoughtful. "Yes, it does." She wasn't pushing him to talk. She wasn't asking for details. She was simply offering space, and he seemed to understand that. "If you ever need anything while you're under my roof," she added, "even if it's just a quiet place to think, you can ask. You are not a burden." The relief in his expression wasn't emotional or dramatic, just a small, visible exhale, the kind someone gives when they feel safe from judgment. "Thank you, Auntie," he said earnestly. "I appreciate that more than you know." They finished dinner shortly after, and as she stood to clear the plates, he finally spoke again, his voice steady but low. "My mother, she's been sick for a while. She's getting treatment, but it's been difficult. I didn't want to say anything earlier because I didn't want to bring sadness into your home." Her heart tightened, not with worry for him in any forbidden or personal way, but with the natural compassion any adult felt for a young person facing something far beyond their age. Illness in a family carried a weight that stretched into every corner of life.
"I'm sorry she's going through that," she replied gently, "and I'm sorry you're carrying it so quietly." He nodded, looking down at his hands. "I don't like troubling people. My father works long hours, and I didn't want to add to anyone's stress." "Sharing isn't troubling," she said. "Sometimes it helps lighten the load, even if just a little." He didn't say anything else, but the silence felt different. No longer heavy, just thoughtful. Later, when the kitchen was clean and the boys retreated to the guest room, she stepped onto the porch and looked out at the glistening street. She thought of Raiden's quiet resilience, of how young he was to be balancing school, home responsibilities, and worry all at once. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't emotional closeness. It was the simple, steady compassion of an elder who understood how life tested people at different stages. She stood there for a while, letting the cool air settle her thoughts. When she returned inside, she found Raiden in the hallway, carrying the empty teacup he'd used. He didn't startle her. He only paused respectfully when he saw her. "I didn't want to leave this in the room," he said. "Thank you," she replied. "Go rest. You've had a long day." As he nodded, she noticed something different. Not worry this time, but determination. Perhaps speaking even a little had given him clarity. She watched as he returned to the guest room, where Larith had finally woken and was now talking about some online assignment. The sight of the two boys chatting lightly brought her a sense of relief. Sometimes companionship, even silent companionship, eased burdens. She moved to her room afterward, turning off the hallway lights one by one. But before she closed her door, she heard a soft tap. Not loud, not urgent, just a tentative sound. When she opened the door, Raiden stood there with a hesitant expression. "Auntie, something else happened today," he said quietly, "and I think I need to tell someone before it gets worse." She paused, her concern rising. Not fear, not tension, just the instinctive readiness of someone who knew a young person needed guidance. "What happened?" she asked gently. He took a slow breath, gathering his thoughts. And in that moment, she realized whatever he was about to share might be more serious than anything he had said earlier. She opened her bedroom door a little wider, giving Raiden space to speak without feeling pressured. His expression held no discomfort,
only the cautious seriousness of someone trying to find the right words. "Come sit in the living room," she said gently. He nodded and followed her down the quiet hallway. The soft glow of the table lamp cast a warm, steady light that made the room feel safe. She sat in her usual chair. He sat on the far end of the sofa, giving respectful distance.
For a moment, he rubbed his palms together slowly, gathering courage. "Auntie, earlier today before we came here, I got a call from the hospital. My mother fainted again. They ran tests, and the doctor said her condition might require more regular visits." She listened with calm patience, not interrupting. He continued, voice steady but tired. "My father was with her, but he sounded overwhelmed. He told me not to worry and to stay with Larif like nothing happened, but I could hear it in his voice. He's exhausted, and I feel like I'm not doing enough." There was no emotional tension between them, no closeness beyond a young man sharing real-life responsibility with an older figure who simply cared. It was the kind of conversation families, teachers, and neighbors often shared, ordinary, human, and respectful. She folded her hands in her lap. "You're doing what any good son would do. Worrying doesn't make you weak. It makes you responsible." Raiden looked down. "I just don't know how to help. I'm studying, working part-time, trying to keep my grades up, and every time the phone rings, I'm scared it's bad news." "That fear is heavy," she said softly, "but you're not failing your family. Sometimes life gives us seasons where doing your best doesn't feel like enough, but it is." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. After a moment, he added, "There's something else. My father asked me not to tell anyone because he doesn't want people to worry. But I felt I needed to say it somewhere, just once." "You can trust this space," she assured him. "You didn't do anything wrong by speaking." He finally exhaled a long breath, and she could see some of the tension ease, not in a personal way, not in a vulnerable to another person way, but simply in the way a young person releases a weight they've been carrying too long. "Thank you, Auntie," he said sincerely. "I didn't know who else to talk to without making things harder." "You're not making anything harder," she replied. "You're trying to handle more than most people your age. That alone deserves understanding." He nodded again, and the room grew quiet. The rain outside had stopped completely. The air held the clean scent of a freshly washed night. From the guest room, a soft rustling sound told her that Larif had turned in asleep. She rose from the chair. "Come," she said gently. "You need rest, and tomorrow will look clearer when you've slept a little." Radon stood, grateful. As he walked toward the guest room, he paused. "Auntie, would it be okay if I leave early tomorrow morning? I want to visit my mother. My father said I don't need to, but I feel like I should be there." "Of course you should go," she replied immediately. "Just let me know what time you'll leave so I can prepare something for you to take along." He hesitated, touched by the offer in a simple, respectful way. "You don't need to do that." "I want to," she answered. "It's the least I can do." He nodded with quiet gratitude and entered the room, closing the door softly behind him. She stayed in the hallway a moment longer, thinking of everything he carried. She had seen many young people grow through difficult seasons, but something about this moment reminded her that guidance didn't always come from grand actions. Sometimes it came from simply listening at the right time. When she returned to her room and dimmed the light, she felt a new sense of purpose settle in her chest. Not worry, just a steady readiness to help however she could. But as she lay down, her phone vibrated gently on the nightstand. She picked it up, expecting a message from a friend or a distant relative. Instead, she saw an unread text from an unknown number. It read, "There's something important you should know about Raiden. Please don't ignore this." She sat up slowly, heart steady but alert, wondering what this could mean, and whether it was something she needed to prepare for before morning. She stared at the message for a few long seconds, not frightened, simply cautious. When something involved a young person under her roof, she believed in approaching it with calm clarity. She read the message again. "There's something important you should know about Raiden. Please don't ignore this." No more details, no name, no explanation. She set the phone aside, and breathed deeply.
Anonymous messages could mean many things: concern, misunderstanding, or even someone trying to stir unnecessary anxiety. Whatever it was, she would address it in the morning with steady composure. Still, sleep came slowly that night. Not because she was worried about radon, but because she was thinking through every responsible step she might need to take. She always believed adults had a duty to offer guidance, without assuming the worst. When dawn finally came, she woke before the alarm. The house was quiet, wrapped in that soft, early stillness. She moved to the kitchen, prepared a small breakfast, and packed a container of food for Radon to take to the hospital. A few moments later, she heard footsteps approaching the hallway. Radon appeared, dressed neatly, his expression calm but serious. He offered a respectful greeting. "You're up early," she said, placing the food container on the counter. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "I want to get to the hospital as soon as possible." She nodded and handed him the bag. "This is for your parents, something warm for when they need it." His grateful look remained completely respectful, nothing beyond the simple appreciation one would offer a trusted elder. "Thank you, Auntie, truly." Before he turned to leave, she decided to ask gently, "Radon, is everything okay outside of home and studies? Anything unusual I should know about?" He seemed surprised by the question, not defensive, just caught off guard. The house felt different after he was gone. Not heavier, not emptier, just calmer. She returned to the kitchen to start her morning routine. A little while later, Larif stumbled out of the guest room, confused to find the place quiet. "Where's Raydan?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "He went to see his mother," she explained. "He'll update you later." Larif's expression softened with concern. "I hope she gets better." "So do I," she said warmly. Throughout the day, she kept herself busy, tidying, tending the plants, preparing lunch. But every so often, she thought of Raydan at the hospital, hoping the visit would bring him clarity and reassurance. In the afternoon, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Raydan. "Auntie, the doctor said my mother is stable. They adjusted her medications. Thank you for everything this weekend." Relief flowed through her in a quiet wave. She replied with a simple, supportive message, nothing overly personal, just the warm steadiness of someone wishing the best for a young man she had guided during a difficult moment. That evening, as the sun set behind the rooftops, she stepped onto the porch and breathed in the cool air. The events of the past day unfolded in her mind, not dramatic, not extraordinary, but meaningful in a human way. A young guest had arrived unexpectedly. He had struggled silently. She had simply offered space, calm, and kindness, and something in his life had eased because of it. Sometimes, she thought, moments that begin with uncertainty end with clarity. And sometimes, the smallest conversations give someone the strength to take their next step with confidence. She closed the door gently behind her, grateful for the peace returning to the house.